the British Red Cross, CARE, Oxfam, Save the Children and World Vision.
Their teams are working on the ground in Ukraine and neighbouring countries to bring vital aid to those who need it most. If you can spare it, your gift to the DEC's humanitarian appeal will go a really long way.
£10 provides essential hygiene supplies for a person for a month.
£50 provides blankets for 4 families.
£100 provides emergency food for 2 families per month.
It's easy to give. You can donate online at dec.org.uk or call the 24-hour donation line on 0370 60 60 900. If you prefer to send a cheque, please post it to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal, PO Box 999, London, EC 3A 3AA. To give £10 on your mobile, simply text the word crisis to 70150. Standard network charges apply for calls and you must be 16 or over. Texts are charged at the standard network rate and your £10 donation will be added to your bill.
100% of your donation goes directly to the DEC to save lives and deliver critical support where it's needed.
Good morning. It's Saturday, which means it's time for the Saturday selection. Coming up on today's show,
we sit down exclusively with the Prime Minister. See the full interview this hour.
Our top stories of the week with journalist and broadcaster Nina Mishkov.
And legendary TV producer Sir Phil Redmond joins us to discuss the decision to sell Channel 4. Is it the right one?
All this and more, but first here's the news.
Good morning, it's 1 minute past 10. I'm Simon Pusey in the GB newsroom. Latest British military intelligence shows that Russia continues to hit Ukrainian non-combatants such as civilians. It follows a Russian rocket strike on a train station in Kramatorsk in eastern Ukraine, which killed at least 52 people, including 5 children, and injured more than 100. The Ministry of Defence says Russia's ambitions to establish a land corridor between Crimea and the Donbass continue to be thwarted by Ukrainian resistance. Barrister Diana Wilson told GBNews that the attack on the station is clearly a war crime.
Civilians are protected individuals, and the train station attack is, in my view, as somebody who's worked in the RAF and has experience of targeting law, clearly a war crime. It will be relatively easy for investigators to see what weapons were used, who had those weapons, and therefore at least proving the war crimes is not likely to be impossible.
10 humanitarian corridors to evacuate people from Ukraine's besieged regions have been agreed. Ukrainian officials say the planned corridors include one from the city of Mariupol. However, the Luhansk governor asked for more evacuations as shelling increased in recent days with the arrival of more Russian forces. He says 30% of people still remain in settlements across the region. The Chancellor's wife has said she will pay UK tax on her worldwide income. It's after it emerged that Rishi Sunak's multi-millionaire wife, Akshata Murthy, holds non-domicile status, which exempts her from paying tax on foreign income. It's as Rishi Sunak admitted to holding a US green card while in office. He said it was returned after he sought guidance and that he followed all laws and paid taxes in full. The Queen and other members of the royal family are expected to privately mark the first anniversary of the Duke of Edinburgh's death. He died on this day last year at Windsor Castle, just months short of his 100th birthday. His daughter, Princess Anne, will mark the day in Sydney as she begins her 3-day tour of Australia. Boris Johnson says he was not placed on a ventilator when he was in hospital with coronavirus in 2020. Mr Johnson tested positive at the end of March 2 years ago and ended up spending 3 days in intensive care. Speaking exclusively to GB News, the Prime Minister acknowledged that doctors struggled to raise his oxygen levels.
For some reason, they couldn't seem to get my oxygen levels to get up to the levels that they wanted. And you should be roughly sort of 94% or above 94% oxygenation of the blood. And I think when I went in, I was in the 80s somewhere.
Boris Johnson there speaking with Conservative MPs Esther McVey and Philip Davis there, and you can see more of that interview in the next few minutes. Around 30,000 vulnerable patients in England with COVID-19 have been treated with highly effective antiviral drugs. The NHS has branded the treatment cutting edge and says they improve symptoms within hours. Paxlovid was developed by Pfizer and in trials was found to have slashed hospital admissions and deaths by 88%. The chocolate firm Ferrero has issued a recall on all of its Kinder chocolate products manufactured at a site in Belgium amid salmonella fears. The company says it is suspending operations at its plant in Arlon, and it says will only reopen once certified by the authorities. The UK Health Secretary Agency said that 67 people are known to have been infected in the outbreak linked to the treats. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Saturday Selection.
Hello, it's Saturday, which means it's time for the Saturday Selection. Coming up on today's show, we sit down for an exclusive interview with the Prime Minister and discuss Ukraine, COVID, and whether we could ever see the country going into lockdown again.
TV producer and creator of Grange Hill, Sir Phil Redmond, joins us to discuss the sell-off of Channel 4.
But first, joining us with her Saturday selection of the stories from this week's papers is journalist and broadcaster Nina Mishkov. Wonderful to see you today.
Lovely to see you, Esther.
So what's caught your eye this week, Nina?
Well, the thing is, whatever you discuss, you cannot ignore the Ukraine situation. That consumes us all. It consumes every news programme. You can't watch without being completely obsessed with it or traumatised by it. I mean, so people have been sitting there in front of their tellies like me saying, what can we do, what can we do, what can we do? And when the Homes for Refugees scheme was announced, I mean, the British people are wonderful. They are so generous. Within days, 100,000 people were offering their homes, and now it's up to 200,000. But the problem is that the Home Office has actually impeded this wonderful generosity. These are people fleeing from a war zone. They've lost their homes, their families, their lives, their country, everything. They're traumatised. You know, these are women and children that, you know, the husbands, the partners are fighting. They don't know whether they're going to see them again or they're going to see their country again. What possible threat can these people pose to our country? And yet, you know, there are these horrendous stories coming out of people waiting, 4 weeks in Poland, 5 weeks in Paris. You know, they cannot somehow get through the visa system. The visa is a logjam. And I noticed an interesting thing in the Times today, in the Times editorial, which is its control versus compassion. And, you know, we are humiliated and shamed by I feel that, by our country's lack of response. And the shambles, the Home Office is completely shambolic. I mean, the fact that they couldn't organise it, something better. I don't know if you know this, but there's the company running the 24-hour helpline for the refugee schemes is called Teleperformance. And it's it's a French-owned company. Now, because it's a French-owned company, it means it is barred from accessing the Home Office database for security reasons. Now, why would the Home Office give this job, knowing that this was going to happen, to a French-based company? It seems utterly outrageous. I don't understand it.
Well, I can sympathise with this, Nina. I mean, I think there should be some security checks on people coming into the country, because I think if we didn't have security checks, those people coming over would be, you know, the Russian intelligence security people would infiltrate.
Well,
they would infiltrate
this
this
women
thing.
and children.
I know, but
you know,
women can be parts of the Russian security
that. I understand.
So they would. I think they might infiltrate it, and so I think we have to have security checks. But I'm absolutely with you that the process is taking far too long, and we've got lots of constituents who have offered up their homes.
Who have been those people you're talking about.
They've offered up their homes, like you said. They've been very generous. They've actually paid for accommodation for people in Poland while they've been waiting to get their visas. And the process has been absolutely shambolic and tortuous. And every day we chase up cases for our constituents and say, where's it up to? Where's it up to? And I think the Home Office in themselves admit the situation
Patel
is
today in the
shambolic
papers has said she's apologising for the frustrating delays in visas. And I think you're right. And I think that was an apt title, Control versus Compassion. Yes, we need to control it, but you know what? We can see what's going on. These people are fleeing from the most horrendous situation. And some of the tactics now that Putin is using to try and win this war, bombing railway stations, horrendous thing that I've seen now, explosives in children's toys to spread fear and paranoia amongst all the Ukrainian citizens. Horrendous.
Compare that to our local council's response, as detailed in the Daily Mail today, where the councils have got to go out and check the accommodation being offered. They're being turned down because there's an inch-high step, or there's not a guard on the rail. You know, these people have escaped from shelters with no possession.
Yeah, I'm sure they can get up a step.
I'm sure
if
they
it's
can.
an inch too high.
If they've travelled across war-torn Ukraine to get here, it just seems a ridiculous situation. And I wonder how long Priti Patel can go on in her job, because this is just. It's another shambolic situation, and the Home Office. It's completely. It seems an unprofessional. To me, it's an unprofessional organisation. We just don't seem to be able to step up to the plate in any way at all.
Yeah. And I think that's why they've brought in now Richard Carrington. Harrington to oversee it, to say, let's speed this up, let's do things, and let's look at it and take some of this. It's a massive department. This is something on top of everything else we've got to deal with. Let's have somebody else in place to try and push it through.
So what did you see? What did you see this week?
Oh, I'm saving mine till the end. I'm saving mine till the end.
In which case, I'm going to jump in. And the story, Nina, that caught my eye this week was about a potential summer of discontent. It was in the Times this week, and basically it was making the point that people like BT have been giving pay rises of 5% to their staff, highest pay rises for years and years. Tesco, I think, were 5.7%. But of course, all of these pay rises are below the rate of inflation.
Completely wiped out.
And obviously the cost of living's going through the roof, and this is barely scratching the surface for people who are struggling to pay their energy bills. And the speculation in the Times this week was whether or not we may see a summer of discontent where groups of workers in the public sector and the private sector sort of go out on strike, mass strike action, in order to try and get inflation beating pay rises, or at least matching inflation, because at the moment people are really struggling and pay rises aren't keeping pace.
Well, exactly. And what about the pensioners, who the triple lock was removed? So the pensioners are at the really sharp end of things, that they have absolutely, and pensioners are the least likely to be able to supplement their meagre pensions. No, there's also, it's already starting the spring of discontent. Look at the, well, if you have the money to get away and go on holiday, can you get out the airport?
Don't even go there. It is a nightmare what's going on, and it's because they hadn't worked for however many years. They're now coming back. They've now got to find staff. They've got to go through the security checks. They're not up to speed, and yet they're thinking customers can come through. So there's actual sort of bottlenecks at every part. Security sets, security systems, signing on, absolute shambles.
The thing this story didn't mention, though, was that actually if people go on strike, of course, they don't get paid while they're on strike. So people might be reluctant to go on strike if they're struggling so much to pay the bill. So it's not an easy option, is it, going on strike?
It's depending on the strength of how many people. But it is a dreadful situation. And, COVID has played a part. People are just ignoring that. People say, we have to live with COVID, but we can't ignore it. COVID has caused all these absences because, I know so many people who have it. And so many people who have it for the second time is the other thing. And it's no point saying, oh, it's just a cold. Some people get away with it like that, but other people really suffer. And it's not just an easy thing. You get the brain fog, never mind long COVID, and it causes... People say, we shouldn't be sort of, pathetic and babyish about this. Oh, we can all carry on. But if there are huge numbers of cases, it completely backfires on the workforce and on all the services. That's why we have all these bottlenecks.
Come on, Esther.
OK, then this is the one I've been saving for, and this was the Short King Spring is here. And what this is all about, it is users of TikTok, 340 million viewers of them, are absolutely obsessed now with shorter blokes. So in the past, it had been tall, dark and handsome. Now it is short, dark and handsome. It is the age of the short guy. And why is that? It's down to people like film stars like Tom Holland, Holland and Joe Janis, but also now, there we go, Tom Holland there with his taller girlfriend, Zendaya. But we've also got now Zelensky, who's only 5'7", and this now are what people are, ladies are looking for, 5'7", there he is. But we've got a list, because I also then was curious, how tall are our leaders around the world? So we've got Boris Johnson, 5'7", so he would be a king, a short king. This is under 5'8". We've got Macron's, he says he's 5'9". Some of us question that, he could be 5'8". We've got Sarkozy, 5'5". We've got Putin, 5'6", and the shortest there is King Jong-un at 5'3". So we've got all of these we've got all of these world leaders there who are tiny people there. So there's one thing to say, and this is what they say: short men make good husbands, but taller men make for a better fling or for a better short-term partner. So what I'd say is, if you want a long-term relationship, go for a short guy. But if you want a short-term relationship, you can go for a tall guy. So that is the dilemma there. But when you see the King Jong-un is only 5'3", I'd say choose your short partner very, very carefully. But Nina, do you like the short guys?
Do you know, I honestly, I've always gone for taller men. And because I'm short, I like, and my other half is tall, he's 6 foot. And so that suits me. But there's such a thing, it's known as the short man syndrome, because that, notice me, you know.
And so President Zelensky hasn't made you change to shorter men.
But I mean, what a hero! What a man! I mean, this is the sort of thing that men should aspire to be.
But do you think you can be short in the TV age and the TikTok age, because nobody knows your height? Whereas when we were growing, you definitely thought, oh, somebody who's tall, somebody who's going to look after you. That's why I think we went for the tall guy. But maybe when we're all on some sort of social media, you can be any height, can't you?
Yes, but on social media you can lie about everything.
And don't we all?
And your age.
Nothing wrong with that, Nina. Nothing wrong with that, Phil.
Nina, thank you very much indeed for that. That's absolutely fantastic. And I don't know, you didn't explain why you went for me, whether it's because I was tall, short, handsome, dark. Well, I used to be dark years ago. That was a long time ago, to be honest.
It had to be because you were tall, dark and handsome.
Thank you so much.
Now short and grey and...
and fat. Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks, Nina. Now, earlier this week, we sat down with the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, in a wide-ranging, exclusive interview covering his handling of the pandemic and the current situation in Ukraine.
And it's been 2 years since he was hospitalised with COVID. We began the interview by looking back to March 2020, when he announced he'd tested positive for the virus. So, Prime Minister...
Esther.
This week, 2 years ago,
yes,
you went into hospital, you went into intensive care. So can we take you back to that moment? Because you've never really spoken about it. And how bad did things get?
Well, I've got to be absolutely clear that whatever happened to me was really mild by comparison with the experience of so many other people, so many thousands of other people in this country. And it was an absolutely appalling pandemic, and remains pretty grim. It hasn't gone away entirely. We've got loads of cases in the country at the moment still.
I know you don't always like to talk about you, and you don't like to talk about sort of personal things.
Yeah, sure.
But you getting, diagnosed, you had COVID and pre-going into hospital. What do you remember as you went on that journey 2 years ago to now?
Well, I do remember that it had sort of just started to come to the country in the sense that more and more people were getting it, and I think I'm right in saying that we had some parliamentary friends who'd got it. I think maybe Matt and Nadine, I think had.
You're blaming them?
No, I'm not. Not blaming them at all. But yeah, I think there was a period, quite a long period, when I.
But you must have known things were sort of going wrong. You would have lost your smell, you wouldn't have been feeling well, you must have known to take in a COVID test, or did you think that was the rigours of being a Prime Minister of a country?
Well, don't forget, Esther, this was in the days when a COVID test was a pretty rare thing, and I certainly didn't want to make use of a test that wasn't necessary.
So you delayed getting the test?
No, I wouldn't say that. I just got on with my job because it was a new disease, and we didn't really know very much about it. And the smell thing, I don't remember at all. I don't remember noticing a loss of sense of smell or anything like that. I think I just sort of. I think it was Chris Whittier after a while who said, I think you probably ought to have a test. And
what had he noticed? I mean, what were the symptoms? You know, you carry, pregnant, first child, you know, what was going on sort of in your family, you know, that people have said, look, Boris, you're just not yourself.
I certainly didn't feel 100%. And then, you're absolutely right, that it was after I'd had it for quite a few days, and I went off and self-isolated. But it kind of didn't go away, and it didn't get better. And then there came the moment when, you know, I said, you know, it's not getting better, and they said, well, we think you ought to go into hospital and have it looked at. As I went to hospital, I looked, and they were fantastic. They were wonderful. I heard
there were times you couldn't get up the stairs, and you know, your wife had to help you. Things weren't.
Anybody who's had COVID, and there are many thousands of people who have been through it in the country today, will tell you that it can be pretty debilitating. It does put you flat on your back. That's what happened to me. It was in the early stages of our understanding of it. I went into hospital, and it was certainly true that my oxygen levels, for whatever reason, were pretty low. And you know, they put the oximeter on your forefinger, and they monitor you very, very carefully. And they were absolutely brilliant. But for some reason, they couldn't seem to get my oxygen levels to get up to the levels that they wanted. And you should be roughly sort of 94%. Or above 94% oxygenation of the blood, and I think when I went in, I was in the 80s somewhere, I think, and I then had a pretty groggy night, and you know, went down even lower. But as I've said before, the NHS was absolutely amazing, and I owe everything to two nurses in particular. The whole team was incredible, but there was a nurse called Jenny and a nurse called Louise, and one from New Zealand. Jenny was from New Zealand and Louise was from Portugal, and they were very, very good at making sure that I got the right amount of oxygen at the right time.
So did they put you on a ventilator? Did you want to go on a ventilator?
You know, I had no views about it. They didn't put me on a ventilator, but this was, I think, in the early days when we thought generally that getting people onto a ventilator was a good thing. And if you'll recall, we launched this thing called the Ventilator Challenge. And the British industry, British manufacturing, responded heroically.
You clearly want to downplay how serious it was because of what other people have been through, and we understand that. But obviously, for you to go to hospital, it must have been pretty serious. I mean, who said you should go to hospital? Who made that decision? You needed to go.
I think it was Philip. I just think it was the medical advice at the time. I think the general view was. I think probably.
See, I have to tell you, Philip, this is a male thing, right? You never want to talk about how you were ill. And I get that. And as a Prime Minister, you might not want to talk about that. So if I say, did it change you as a person?
I had two wonderful doctors called Nick, both from St Thomas's, and it was their sort of view that I probably needed to come in. So it wasn't my idea. But on the... I mean, I think when you're going through something like that, you don't actually think of it in those terms. I was thinking about, you know, all the stuff I had to do, and I mean, I spent most of the time thinking, you know, God, I wish I could I've got to get out of here because I'm pretty certain I've got to do a press conference tomorrow morning. I'm pretty certain we've got, you know, we've got, you know.
But on that point, do you think that what happened to you affected any of the decisions that you made regarding lockdowns and restrictions?
I knew. Things like that? Yeah, because I think this has been a line of thought, an inquiry by people. People have said, well, did my own personal experience of having a bad brush with COVID make me more risk averse, which is one way people have characterised the question. And I really think the answer to that is no. I was thinking all the time about the medical advice that we were given, and we tried wherever we could to get the balance right, but the priority was public health and saving life, and we were very clear about that from the beginning.
Joining us now to react to the Prime Minister's comments on COVID is Conservative Home's Deputy Editor, Henry Hill. Henry, we think back to that time when the Prime Minister was seriously ill and people genuinely feared that he may die. If you remember, I remember people sort of speculating on that. Why do you think he wants to play down how ill he was at the time?
Well, I mean, obviously I don't know the Prime Minister personally, so there's always an element of speculation. But I think that if you are the leader of the country and you don't want people to see you as vulnerable, you know, you want to be perceived to have got through it. And also, I suppose, you still don't want to worry people because, of course, we're lucky that hopefully we've come out of the other end of the pandemic. But talking up how scary it is for people who are still at risk, who might be especially nervous at the moment because we have wound down restrictions. And so whilst that's great for most of us, there is a sort of subsection of the population for whom this is a bit of a scary time because they have pre-existing conditions and those protections that they had are gone. I can understand, I think, why he wouldn't want to be sitting there being like, oh God, it was terrible, absolutely awful. You know, and combined with, as you say, the sort of, I think, quite traditional male reluctance to admit to being fragile in any
My dad is
circumstances.
probably the worst. Literally, if he were like Boris had have gone into intensive care, he would have said, oh, I was fine and I was thinking of other things and I had business and what have you to get on with.
Precisely.
What I will say is Boris has never talked about this. The Prime Minister's never talked about this in 2 years. Maybe now 2 years later, because it is far enough away, he felt he could. But you could see there, as you say, that reluctance. But he did give us some insight into that. When he said, did it change you as a person? I think that's an interesting one to ponder a little bit more. Many of us would think it did change him. This sort of bon vivant was not so much a bon vivant anymore. This sort of libertarian, this sort of freedom, fighter, as it were, did not seem to be there. He didn't quite answer it. He just said he was busy doing other things, thinking about press conferences. Did you see any changes? Somebody who would write a lot on political sort of commentary?
I think so. I think certainly at the very least what happened is that because of the pandemic, Boris didn't get to have the premiership that he wanted to have. You know, he was elected as an optimist. He was going to, sort of bank the dividends of Brexit as he saw it, redistribute some money around the country. And, there was there wasn't a lot of detail, Boris being Boris, but there was a kind of vibe to his initial premiership that got completely derailed by the pandemic. And he had to become this kind of necessarily authoritarian figure, giving lots of somber press briefings and overseeing a sort of a national tragedy in some respects. And I think that it can be, it's interesting the extent to which people who take different views on lockdown, for example, take the view of whether or not this was just necessity and he was just doing or whether it did actually change his perspective. Because a lot of people, once they have a personal experience of something dangerous, it does change their risk appetite.
Henry, we'll be coming back to you a little bit later because we'll be playing out the full interview in parts. But coming up after this break, more of our exclusive interview with Boris Johnson, so don't miss it.
And we'll discuss the privatisation of Channel 4 with legendary producer and creator of iconic TV shows, Sir Phil Redmond. All this and much more up next.
Europe is in the grip of the most devastating humanitarian crisis since World War II.
The people of Ukraine are facing unimaginable suffering
as their homes are destroyed and their loved ones are killed.
Millions of people are being forced to flee for their lives, carrying only their children, their pets, and the clothes on their back.
The pain, loss and destruction grows by the day.
The people of Ukraine urgently need our help.
Already a vast humanitarian operation is underway. Britain's Disasters Emergency Committee, or DEC, brings together 15 leading aid charities to respond to overseas disasters quickly and efficiently. These charities include the British Red Cross, CARE, Oxfam, Save the Children and World Vision.
Their teams are working on the ground in Ukraine and neighbouring countries to bring vital aid to those who need it most. If you can spare it, your gift to the DEC's humanitarian appeal will go a really long way.
£10 provides essential hygiene supplies for a person for a month.
£50 provides blankets for 4 families.
£100 provides emergency food for 2 families per month.
It's easy to give. You can donate online at dec.org.uk or call the 24-hour donation line on 0370 60 60 900. If you prefer to send a cheque, please post it to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal, PO Box 999, London, EC 3A 3AA. To give £10 on your mobile, simply text the word crisis to 70150. Standard network charges apply for calls and you must be 16 or over. Texts are charged at the standard network rate and your £10 donation will be added to your bill.
100% of your donation goes directly to the DEC to save lives and deliver critical support where it's needed.
Welcome back to the Saturday Selection. Now, the government has announced plans to privatise Channel 4, with Culture Secretary Nadine Dorries saying the current government ownership is holding the channel back.
Channel 4 was launched in 1982 and, despite being a government-owned broadcasting company, does not receive any public funding, getting its money through advertisements.
There have been suggestions that the channel could be worth between 600 million and 1.5 billion, and bids are expected to come in next year with aims of completing the sale in 2024.
Well, joining us now to discuss this move is the TV producer and creator of iconic TV show Grange Hill, as well as Channel 4 famous programmes like Hollyoaks and Brookside, Sir Phil Redmond. Phil, thank you so much for joining us. What do you make of this potential sale of Channel 4?
Well, I think I've said since they cancelled Brookside, I've been talking about they need a change, but I've become less emotional about it over the years. I think everybody's just got carried away a bit by the word privatisation. I think what we should be really talking about is a change of ownership, past moving it out from being publicly funded, independent channel to something else. My preferred option would have been to sort of collapse it into the BBC to get rid of all the admin costs of actually running the channel, but use the income to subsidise the licence fee. But, you know, you can talk about perhaps giving it back to ITV, selling it to ITV, because that was originally what the intent of the 4th channel, as it was originally called, was to give ITV another channel to compete with BBC One and BBC Two. You've got STV and you've got ITV, so I don't think we should worry about the term privatisation. What we should be thinking about is it's time for change.
You were there at the beginning of Channel 4. Why was it set up? Because there were lots of reasons it was set up at the time. And why were you excited to be a part of this new station?
Well, I think it came back to the fact there's a legendary TV writer called Alan Plater who described the BBC drama department as one room with 9 doors. And so it was always very difficult to get new ideas and things through. So the idea of having a new channel that would actually provide 30% more airtime, it would allow, you know, a lot more people, a lot more new ideas, new techniques, new views, new opinions on. And there was 2 things really. One was to create a channel that would allow voices that had not previously been heard, and to give them a platform and create an independent production sector. But the second big sort of like aim at Channel 4 was to create competition within the advertising market, because there was only ITV who had this kind of sole monopoly of advertising on television. And so again, that was what Channel 4 was, and that's what I meant about going back to ITV, because in the early days, ITV actually sold the advertising on Channel 4 but had no control over the programming. So I think, you know, we've got to, again, keep always coming back to the original remit. It was to create a new channel with new ideas, new programming. but also to break the monopoly on advertising revenue. That's moved on now. There's so many platforms, so many opportunities for people to advertise. We're still sort of working our way through monetizing the digital age. So I think what we really need to think about...
And you're quite right, Phil, because, I mean, Mrs. Thatcher brought it in, one, to get the private sector up and running, all the new small production companies like yourself, and also to show that, a public sector, a company like the BBC, didn't need all this public money. It didn't need that $4.5 billion or what have you. But going forward, if it is sold off, would you like terms and stipulations to go with that selling off? I know you tried to bring Channel 4 to Liverpool. Do you think it should therefore be outside London, sell the London building?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's it. If you want to bring a real change into broadcasting, you should actually make it part of the condition of sale that the whole thing has to be outside London. I mean, Channel 4 had tried to adapt and tried to react to the government's desire to move out and, in fact, join up with the levelling up agenda by creating offices in Leeds and Glasgow and places. But, the sort of corporate heart and the kind of like spirit of the channel still stays in London. So I think if you are going to go down this route and say it needs to be sold off in some shape or form, well, it has to be based outside London, in the north somewhere. And obviously, the best place for it would be in the centre of the creative universe in Liverpool.
So, Phil Redmond, you've got it right, and it's certainly the centre of the creative arts today, isn't it, with the Grand National? So you're spot on. So thank you for joining us. Coming up next, the rest of our exclusive interview with the Prime Minister. Stay with us to hear what he had to say on locking down the country and whether he'd do the same thing again.
This and much more next. Don't go anywhere.
Europe is in the grip of the most devastating humanitarian crisis since World War II.
The people of Ukraine are facing unimaginable suffering
as their homes are destroyed and their loved ones are killed.
Millions of people are being forced to flee for their lives, carrying only their children, their pets, and the clothes on their back.
The pain, loss and destruction grows by the day.
The people of Ukraine urgently need our help.
Already a vast humanitarian operation is underway. Britain's Disasters Emergency Committee, or DEC, brings together 15 leading aid charities to respond to overseas disasters quickly and efficiently. These charities include the British Red Cross, CARE, Oxfam, Save the Children and World Vision.
Their teams are working on the ground in Ukraine and neighbouring countries to bring vital aid to those who need it most. If you can spare it, your gift to the DEC's humanitarian appeal will go a really long way.
£10 provides essential hygiene supplies for a person for a month.
£50 provides blankets for 4 families.
£100 provides emergency food for 2 families per month.
It's easy to give. You can donate online at dec.org.uk or call the 24-hour donation line on 0370 60 60 900. If you prefer to send a cheque, please post it to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal, PO Box 999, London, EC 3A 3AA. To give £10 on your mobile, simply text the word crisis to 70150. Standard network charges apply for calls and you must be 16 or over. Texts are charged at the standard network rate and your £10 donation will be added to your bill.
100% of your donation goes directly to the DEC to save lives and deliver critical support where it's needed.
Welcome back to the Saturday selection on GB News. Earlier this hour, we brought you part 1 of our exclusive sit-down interview with the Prime Minister Boris Johnson, where he spoke to us about his experience with COVID-19 and hospitalisation.
The Prime Minister also spoke to us about handling COVID and the prospects of future lockdowns. Let's have a look at what he had to say.
And don't forget to get in touch with us with your views about what you think of this interview. And here you've got GBviews at gbnews.uk. Here he is.
You always strike people as being the least sort of likely to be a nanny state Prime Minister, and yet, as a result, large possibly of what you went through, we're having this thing where we're banning special offers on products that the Department of Health consider to be unhealthy.
Okay, Philip.
We're telling supermarkets where they can put which products they can put on which shelves and whatever. So
we've modified some of that in deference to your wishes.
See, he's getting well now. He's getting well. He's modifying some of the nanny-state stuff.
Can I just say, because I know that I'm not a nanny-state man. I don't believe in it. I don't believe in it. And if we've got to move away from it, because COVID, we had to look after people. We had to look after people. We really, really did. And I think that, the history of all plagues and diseases shows that the public overwhelmingly want government to take decisions to avert the worst consequences for everybody. Because although people believe in their own personal responsibility, they don't necessarily believe in the sense of personal responsibility of the person next door. And that's the problem when it comes to a pandemic. And that's why government has to act. And that was, I'm afraid, the job we had to do. It wasn't easy. On buy one get one free offers and Terry's chocolate oranges, which I know that you are quite
40% of all products in shops.
Quite properly addicted to. Let me just say, do you know how much fatter we are post-COVID? I think I saw a figure the other day. This is all, I'm giving you this exclusively, okay? I think there's 36% more obesity. I think can that possibly be right? It's huge. There's been a huge increase in obesity as a result of, or 36% of people are fatter than they were. Maybe that's probably a more accurate way of expressing the statistic. And we were already, before the thing began, Philip, we were already the fattest nation in Europe, with the possible exception of the Maltese. And that is a massive charge on the taxpayer.
So can I look at this?
And so you and I, Philip, always defend the taxpayer, and the taxpayer is coughing up huge quantities for the consequences of that obesity. And I'm no advertisement for willpower, but we need to recognise.
Can I just go back to that point you just said?
The effects of obesity on our taxes.
So if we talk about lockdown and what happened because of lockdown, you've just given us an example there that obesity has gone up considerably. So
obesity,
for some
mental health issues,
and mental health. So for a lot of us, we always said there's a cost of COVID, and you rightly stood in and protected. We also said there's a cost of lockdown too, and we're looking at that now, whether it is the amount, 400 billion impact on the public's finances. We look at the mental health, we look at the damning Ofsted report of what happened to children through lockdown. So I want to ask, was enough consideration given as you were looking at COVID and lockdown, was enough consideration given to lockdown and what you were doing during lockdown?
What I would say is, if you look at us now, Esther, and you look at what we did, you know what Rishi did with that very prompt, very far-reaching furlough programme, all the bounce back loans, all the things that we did. What it did was it protected British jobs, protected British industry, protected British business, so that it put us in a state where we were able to bounce out of it in the way that we have. And that's why we've got the economy growing in the way that we've been able to do, fastest in the G7 for 21, the youth unemployment, I think at a record low, people on payroll.
Massive job vacancies, though, over 1 million.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
But we grew up as well. You're younger than me, but when I was growing up as a conservative, the horrifying thing was mass unemployment, and it was millions. It was millions of people in the 80s and 90s who had the devastating effects on their self-esteem, their self-belief of feeling that the society, the economy had no place for them. And that was a terrible thing. What we've got now is shortage of labour. We've got probably 500,000 pairs of hands short in the economy, and what we're doing is getting people into work.
Oh, lockdown's had a huge impact on the economy, though.
Just coming back to Esther's point. Jacob Rees-Mogg said recently that he thought some of the restrictions that were introduced were inhuman. Would you agree with that? He referred to the people separating a mother and son at a funeral. Do you consider some of them to be
I do, and I think that some of the, I mean, I understand why people feel that, and I think that people felt particularly the loss of the ability to see their loved ones in care homes or to meet properly for funerals, or I mean, it was just appalling. To say nothing of the loss of religious services that matter so much to people's spirit. So I totally understand
so
that.
If we had a pandemic again, would you go into a full lockdown?
I want to avoid any such thing ever happening again, and I can't rule out something, Esther. I can't, say that we wouldn't be forced to do non-pharmaceutical interventions again of the kind that we did, but I think we've learned a lot, and I think we would really try to go for the earliest possible program of inoculation and vaccination. I mean, that was
the lockdowns again.
Look, I think it would be irresponsible of any leader, in any democracy, to say that they're going to rule out something that could save life. And I believe that the things that we did saved lives. There could be, I've got to be absolutely frank with you, there could be a new variant, more deadly. There could be a variant that affects children badly, that we really need to contain. I'm not going to take any options off the table, but I don't think it will happen. I think we're now in the phase of, and this is the view of all the advisors I talk to, that we're now in the phase where the virus is losing its potency overall, and we've got a massively vaccinated UK population. What we need to do is double down on that.
Let's return to Henry Hill for more reaction to the Prime Minister's comments on lockdown. Henry, the thing that struck me about that section was that he started off by saying, I'm not a nanny state man, and then gave a justification for all nanny state measures that he was introducing. And then he seemed to agree with Jacob Rees-Mogg that some of the lockdowns, things that were introduced were inhuman, but then refused to rule out a future lockdown. What did you make of what he said?
Well, I think this just shows how the pandemic sort of changed Boris Johnson, because he's maybe an instinctual libertarian and he still wants to think of himself that way. But as he said, a lot of these facts about obesity that he's now using to justify these measures and restricting food sales and everything else, they were the case before the pandemic when he was busy being a libertarian. And if you genuinely believe in freedom of choice and that kind of thing, then it shouldn't really matter. So he's kind of conceded the principles of the other side of the argument. And this is why I think that when he says, I'm the same man I was before, conservatives, free market conservatives especially, can take that with a pinch of salt.
So should we judge him on what he says or what he does?
Judge every politician by their actions every time.
So he is a nanny state man?
I would say so.
In the last part of our exclusive interview with the Prime Minister, we discussed the ongoing Partygate saga and the situation in Ukraine.
Fines, visas and Britain's support for Ukraine were all topics of conversation. So let's have a look now.
One thing, though, that you have been repeatedly questioned on, and we see this week that, 20 people did get fines in number 10 Downing Street. People talk about the Partygate as they were going through sort of great upset and turmoil. What is your answer to that now that 20 people have been fined?
Look, first of all, just back to what I was saying about people's feelings about lockdown and the point you were making about some things feeling inhuman to people. I totally understand why people feel as they do, and why people have been so enraged. Of course I understand that, and I've apologised for things that we got wrong in number 10.
Have you got it under control, number 10 now?
Of course. But on what actually happened, the details, a lot of nonsense has been talked, but I just think it's much better if I wait until the conclusion of the inquiry before saying anything further. I've said I won't comment on it. What I will do is say much more at the end. And what we're getting on with, I've got to let the police get on with their job.
Can I just ask a general question of you,
Yes.
Prime Minister? We're here in the Thatcher room.
I know.
And, everybody knows what Mrs Thatcher believed in. She believed in individual freedom, individual responsibility, the free market, low taxes, sound money. We all know what Thatcherism is. I just wonder, what is Johnsonism? What are the guiding things that anchor your
giving everybody throughout this country the opportunities that they deserve, commensurate with the talents and initiative that they have. It's about levelling up, and I think that's why people came to us in 2019, and why, in spite of all the difficulties that the government has faced, whether it's Ukraine or the pandemic or getting Brexit done, people can see that this is a government that has a mission, and it's a moral, economic mission at the same time, and it's about making sure that the whole of the UK prospers and succeeds in the way that it can. I know there was more we should have done to get HS2 to Bradford.
To get rid of HS2. To scrap HS2, Boris. To scrap
it's about Northern Powerhouse Rail, and what you need to do is give those areas the same confidence that comes from knowing they have a commuter-style network.
And then we'd all agree with that
enables people. So if you're living in the West Midlands, so Andy Street's vision for the West Midlands is one that we've got to drive forward. I mean, when we did the integrated rail plan, I mean, that was an incredible thing. We were shortening journey times, and it's the biggest investment in rail this country has seen.
But Prime Minister, the question at the moment
I got beaten up by Philip for not putting a fast enough link into Bradford when we're cutting all those journey times across the whole of the country.
But can I ask you about the cost of living? Because that is going to be the biggest issue coming forward, the cost of living.
Well, it already is.
Absolutely
it is. And it's going to get worse.
It is,
yes.
And for some of us Conservatives, we would have said, what can we do to help people with the cost of living? We would have said, cut the taxes. We would have said, cut VAT on fuel. You've chosen not to do that. Why?
Esther, I don't know whether you were for that. But the spring statement was the biggest tax cut. If you take together what Rishi did on the NICS thresholds, which was completion of a promise, fulfilment of a promise that I made in 2019.
Some of us had questioned Nick as well. Why would we ever increase it?
Sorry, no, but we raised the threshold to which before you pay NICS, right?
Yeah. But some of us are even questioning increasing the NIC threshold.
No. But if you increase the threshold, what that does is that takes people out of paying.
Yes, yeah.
And so we raised it from 9,000 to 12,500, and that would literally takes 70% of the payers of national insurance contributions got a tax cut as a result of what Rishi did in the spring statement. It was literally the biggest tax cut in the last 10 years. The biggest tax cut. If you add that to what he said about income tax, by the way, she had income tax. Various times. By the way, don't forget, at times of difficulty, Mrs. Thatcher had state spending running very, very high as a proportion of GDP because of the economic difficulties that the country was in. So something like COVID, I think she would have dealt with in exactly the same way. What she would not have done, Philip, is said we've got to borrow more. And there are some people who say we should just borrow more and risk interest rates going up and spend and run that risk. We're already spending £83 billion a year servicing our debts. That's crazy. We've got to keep a tight grip on it. So if you just cut taxes, you've got to find the money from somewhere. We've already cut taxes very considerably, but we need to make sure that we invest in our NHS at the same time. And so the cost of living crisis is best fixed by tackling the immediate problems people are facing, cost of fuel, helping people with their heating costs, the whole 9.1 billion package that Rishi has put together, but also making sure that people have high-wage, high-skilled jobs. That in the end is what the Thatcher revolution delivered. What we want is high-wage, high-skilled jobs with a great deal of security, so that people can know that they have the freedom and the opportunity to do things that they want to, like buy their own home,
I know we're running out of time. I know we've only got a certain amount of time with you. And I just,
have I filibustered my way through this?
Yes, you did.
You have.
And I just wondered if you did want to answer anything, if there is time, on Zelensky.
I think most of the world will accept that the UK have been leading the way in helping Ukraine. President Zelensky said that himself. We were on a parliamentary delegation to the US last week where they acknowledged how we'd been leading the world in supporting Ukraine. I just wondered how you saw the conflict ending and what more we can do to help those Ukrainians who are seeking refuge in the UK, who are sort of being held up by the sort of form filling and bureaucracy.
Yeah.
If there was any more we could do to be able to get them out of Ukraine a bit quicker.
Yeah. So first of all, on helping the Ukrainians to come here, we've already given visas to tens of, I think, almost 30,000 people, and the number is climbing quite fast. And that's a good-sized town now, and it will continue to grow. British people have shown him amazing generosity, warm-heartedness. 200,000 homes, families open for Ukrainians to come here. What those women and children want is to be back in their own homes. And so to your first point, we've got to make sure that Putin fails in his catastrophic attempt to conquer, subdue, destroy another country, a neighbouring Slavic country. And the UK is not in the business of engaging itself or NATO in direct conflict with Russia. That would not be sensible. But what we can do is give them maximum economic, political and military support to Ukrainians to defend themselves. And what this war has revealed is that Putin was fundamentally wrong in that bizarre essay that he wrote. He was fundamentally wrong. He said that Ukraine wasn't really a proper country and that it should be a part of Russia, essentially. That has proved to be the diametric opposite of the case. The Ukrainians love their country. They will fight to the end for their country. There is no way that Putin can now succeed. That is the brute, unarguable fact of the case. What we have to do now is make sure that we continue to give the Ukrainians the help and support that they need. Continue to intensify the sanctions
and did this war show
continue
the strength
to
of
show
British intelligence?
to show more military support and other support. And on intelligence, I think that if you look back at the previous few weeks, it was clear that US and UK intelligence was pretty much on the money.
Prime Minister, thank you so much.
Thank you both very much. It's been an honour. It's been surprised. I thought that was going to be much more. Particularly I was worried about. I knew the chocolate oranges was coming. Anyway, thank you for your time. I'm sorry we haven't. I'm sorry. It's been so long delayed.
Hey, listen, you've had a lot on your plate, even if it was a chocolate orange.
They're very good chocolate oranges.
We now know what he likes.
Exactly.
Chocolate oranges. We didn't reference ever a chocolate orange. That's you.
That might be true. That might be true.
Henry Hill is still with us to talk about that interview there. At the start, he said he had a grip on Number 10 after Partygate. Has he?
I mean, I hope so, but I've been covering, we cover Boris Johnson and the Conservative Party professionally, and it's remarkable how often we hear about Downing Street, even before Partygate. The extent to which rows between his advisors dominated the government's agenda was extraordinary. So maybe he finally does, and he's kicked the habits of a lifetime, but I'm not sure I believe it.
Now, in that section, Henry, he talked about Johnsonism. I asked him what Johnsonism was. He seemed to say it was about levelling up, I think was what I got out of it. Can you do a better job of defining it?
Johnsonism doesn't exist. To any functional extent, Johnsonism doesn't exist. It's a load of aspirations and slogans with no delivery plan. They've backed down on planning, they've backed down on building HS2. They'll probably back down on quite a lot more. There's a lot of nice aspirations. You saw it in the education plan. We're going to get 90% of children achieving X, Y, or Z. Do they say how they're going to do it? No. That's the best summary of Johnsonism I can give you.
And the tax issue, obviously, we want to see low tax. We never wanted to see the increase in national insurance contributions. We've got the highest tax rate, for 70 odd years. This is not what we as Conservatives would want to
The thing to ask every Conservative Chancellor from henceforth is fiscal drag. The fact that tax thresholds are not linked to inflation means that once we start having high inflation, more and more taxpayers are going to get sucked into higher rates of tax, and the Chancellor's not going to have to declare it, Parliament won't have to vote for it. So that's what you should always press Conservative politicians on. Because if they're talking about, we're cutting the rate, but they're letting millions of people get sucked into the higher rate without telling anyone, they're not low tax Conservative in my book.
Henry Hill, thank you very much indeed for joining us today.
Joining us now to react to those comments and what we're doing, we're now going into the news. Here we are.
Coming up, all your latest showbiz and sports news.
We'll discuss the cost of living crisis with two experts on the subject.
And updates from the Grand National. But first, here's the weather.
Europe is in the grip of the most devastating humanitarian crisis since World War II.
The people of Ukraine are facing unimaginable suffering
as their homes are destroyed and their loved ones are killed.
Millions of people are being forced to flee for their lives, carrying only their children, their pets, and the clothes on their back.
The pain, loss and destruction grows by the day.
The people of Ukraine urgently need our help.
Already a vast humanitarian operation is underway. Britain's Disasters Emergency Committee, or DEC, brings together 15 leading aid charities to respond to overseas disasters quickly and efficiently. These charities include the British Red Cross, CARE, Oxfam, Save the Children, and World Vision.
Their teams are working on the ground in Ukraine and neighbouring countries to bring vital aid to those who need it most. If you can spare it, your gift to the DEC's humanitarian appeal will go a really long way.
£10 provides essential hygiene supplies for a person for a month.
£50 provides blankets for 4 families.
£100 provides emergency food for 2 families per month.
It's easy to give. You can donate online at dec.org.uk or call the 24-hour donation line on 0370 60 60 900. If you prefer to send a cheque, please post it to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal, PO Box 999, London, EC 3A 3AA. To give £10 on your mobile, simply text the word crisis to 70150. Standard network charges apply for calls and you must be 16 or over. Texts are charged at the standard network rate and your £10 donation will be added to your bill.
100% of your donation goes directly to the DEC to save lives and deliver critical support where it's needed.
Good morning, welcome back to the Saturday Selection, coming up in the next hour.
All the latest showbiz news.
What next for the cost of living? We'll speak to 2 entrepreneurs about the impact of the ongoing crisis.
And an update from the Grand National. We're hoping to speak to the last year's winning trainer, Henry de Bromhead. But first, here's your latest news.
Good morning, it's just gone 11 o'clock. I'm Simon Pusey in the GB newsroom. Latest British military intelligence shows that Russia continues to hit Ukrainian non-combatants such as civilians. It follows a Russian rocket strike on a train station in Kramatorsk in eastern Ukraine, which killed at least 52 people, including 5 children, and injured more than 100. The Ministry of Defence says Russia's ambitions to establish a land corridor between Crimea and the Donbass continue to be thwarted by Ukrainian resistance. Barrister Diana Wilson told GB News that the attack on the station is clearly a war crime.
Civilians are protected individuals, and the train station attack is, in my view, as somebody who's worked in the RAF and has experience of targeting law, clearly a war crime. It will be relatively easy for investigators to see what weapons were used, who had those weapons, and therefore at least proving the war crimes is not likely to be impossible.
10 humanitarian corridors to evacuate people from Ukraine's besieged regions have been agreed. Ukrainian officials say the planned corridors include one from the city of Mariupol. However, the Luhansk governor asked for more evacuations as shelling increased in recent days with the arrival of more Russian forces. He says 30% of people still remain in settlements across the region. The Chancellor's wife has said she will pay UK tax on all of her worldwide income. It's after it emerged that Rishi Sunak's multi-millionaire wife, Akshata Murray, holds non-domicile status, which exempts her from paying tax on foreign income. It's as Rishi Sunak admitted to holding a US green card while in office. He said it was returned after he sought guidance and that he followed all laws and paid taxes in full. Boris Johnson says he was not placed on a ventilator when he was in hospital with coronavirus in 2020. Mr Johnson tested positive at the end of March 2 years ago and ended up spending 3 days in the intensive care unit. Speaking exclusively to GBNews, the Prime Minister acknowledged that doctors struggled to raise his oxygen levels.
For some reason, they couldn't seem to get my oxygen levels to get up to the levels that they wanted. And you should be roughly sort of 94%. Or above 94% oxygenation of the blood, and I think when I went in, I was in the 80s somewhere.
Boris Johnson speaking with the Conservative MPs Esther McVeigh and Philip Davies there. The Queen and other members of the royal family are expected to privately mark the first anniversary of the Duke of Edinburgh's death. He died on this day last year at Windsor Castle, just months short of his 100th birthday. His daughter, Princess Anne, will mark the day in Sydney as she begins her 3-day tour of Australia. Emmanuel Macron has made a final appeal to voters ahead of the first round of the French presidential election on Sunday. The opinion polls show Mr Macron is just ahead of the far-right candidate Marine Le Pen, but supporters say there is a growing sense of discomfort at the title race. He added he regretted joining the election campaign late due to dealing with the war in Ukraine. A Dutch teenager who disappeared after going diving off the coast of Malaysia has died. That's according to his British father. Officials say that 14-year-old Nathan Chesters likely drifted into Indonesian waters. Chesters was reported missing on Wednesday afternoon, about an hour into a training dive with his father, a Frenchwoman and a Norwegian diving instructor. The 3 other divers were rescued hours after the initial missing report. Around 30,000 vulnerable patients in England with COVID-19 have been treated with highly effective antiviral drugs. The NHS has branded the treatment cutting edge and says they improve symptoms within hours. Paxlovid was developed by Pfizer and in trials was found to have slashed hospital admissions and deaths by 88%. And the chocolate firm Ferrero has issued a recall on all of its Kinder chocolate products manufactured at a site in Belgium amid salmonella fears. The company says it is suspending operations at its plant in Arlon, and it says will only reopen once certified by the authorities. The UK Health Security Agency says that 67 people are known to have been infected in the outbreak linked to the treats. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now, though, let's return to Saturday Selection.
Hello and welcome back to the Saturday Selection. Coming up this hour,
we're joined by journalist and broadcaster Hayley Palmer to discuss the biggest stories in the world of showbiz, including Ed Sheeran's court case and Will Smith's 10-year ban following that Oscars slap.
And we talk to sports broadcaster Aidan McGee about all the sportings coming up this weekend, including the Grand National and Manchester City versus Liverpool, to name a few.
And we discuss the cost of living crisis and what this means for the British people.
But still with us in the studios with her Saturday selection of what's coming up in, or what's in today's paper, is journalist and broadcaster Nina Mishkov. So, what has caught your eye today?
Well, not just caught my eye, it's slapped everybody across the face. It's the whole saga of the Rishi Sunak's wife's non-dom status. And she, of course, has said that she's now going to be paying the tax. She'd previously only paid £30,000 a year to retain her non-dom status. I mean, I wasn't really aware of non-dom status. Doesn't kind of...
Don't you have that much money,
no,
Nina? Haven't you got multiple, I don't know, companies across the globe?
No. But it's interesting, if you look at the, and everybody has an opinion on this, but if you see what the eye says, Rishi Sunak fighting for his political survival. Now, you are in politics, so you'll know more than me, but just looking at it from the outside, I'm thinking, my God, what a vicious world you live in, because it's.
How could two nice people like us be in that world?
Well, I'm beginning to think I have my doubts a bit. There we go. No, but the thing is, the last couple of weeks have been quite extraordinary. Rishi was the kind of the sort of the crown prince, sort of in waiting. He was the one. All opinion polls said, Rishi's the guy. Blah, blah. And then suddenly we're hit with this business of the spring statement, and it all goes downhill from there. There's the business of trying to fill up somebody else's car at a petrol station, trying to pay for your can of Diet Coke or whatever it is by putting the Coke onto the card reader machine. So that's somebody who doesn't actually have a grasp of how money works on the basic level. And now there's this tax dom thing.
What do you think about? Should Rishi's wife be brought into the political debate? And is she fair game? Do you think?
Well, in one way it's unfair, but really, when you are leading the country, you have the whole of the country's finances in your hands. What Rishi Sunak does affects every one of us. So he has to be squeaky clean, and part of that is that his family wealth, i.e. acquired from his wife, has to be, you have to scrutinise it completely.
I think the reality is, as Nina said, that you get that scrutiny when you're in politics, and if you are the Chancellor, you're going to get that. I mean, I've been a Secretary of State and I got it, but that's like the top post, next to the Prime Minister, the Chancellor's top post, and they will dig into every single bit of you, or your finances. Have you declared it? Therefore, have you broken any rules? So whilst you wouldn't have that scrutiny, if you were anybody else, as soon as you're in the political arena, you get that scrutiny,
and quite rightly, I think, and quite rightly.
Do you think that she was wrong to be a non-dom and pay?
Yes, absolutely. When we first heard the story, we thought, oh well, perhaps it's unfair, but it's actually a question of just literally ticking a box. Ticking a box on a form.
Just to play devil's advocate. I mean, lots of people say, her argument was, I pay the money I earn in the UK, I pay tax in the UK on that. The money that I earn in India and stays in India is taxed in India. Mm-hmm. Now, lots of people always say to me, look, if they say about Amazon and they say about, if you're making your money in the UK, you should be taxed in the UK. Doesn't the same apply to her, that if she's making money in India, it should be taxed in India and not the UK?
Taxed in India and taxed in this country. If you were American, that's exactly what happens. And, we're the only country in the world, I think, that does this.
You did say it was exacerbated because you couldn't have dual you couldn't have dual citizenship if you were in India. And she elected to keep her sort of Indian citizenship.
Which she's entitled to do. But then what comes out yesterday is the fact that Rishi Sunak retained his green card. So you have somebody at the heart of government who presumably wants to be Prime Minister, who actually hasn't committed 100% to this country. His wife is Indian and does not want to, presumably is not a UK citizen. He has got residence in the United States. That is all very murky. But what interests me is who leaked this story. Who leaked it? And although Boris Johnson was very quick to sort of say, oh, well, blah, 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 he's doing a wonderful job, that to me is the kiss of death, frankly.
Whenever you've got my full support, usually.
That is the kiss of death, isn't it? Surely.
And who does have that information? I think people say, oh, was it people who worked in the Treasury? Was it sort of, I don't know, an advisor who had sympathies for the Labour Party? Was it Number 10? Patrick O'Flynn in the Express today says, it was a wise decision, even if it was late in the day, it was a wise decision from his wife to say that I will now pay tax on it. But he also says, look, does this not say in the end, high achievers, will they ever decide to go into politics with this scrutiny? And who is selling the stories on you? If you don't know, it's a difficult, tricky world. Would you go into politics?
I read somewhere that this was in Private Eye a year ago and nobody really picked up on it. But
well, good for Ian Hislop then.
I don't know if that's true or not. I'm sure I read that somewhere. I could have got completely wrong. I just wanted to highlight a story that was in today's Times on page 59. It's called We Complained to HSBC, Then It Shut Our Account. And it's a church group. It's actually in my constituency, this church group. That's the Saltaire Methodist Church Wives who basically had a charity account with HSBC, who then told them that they were going to start charging it £5 a month to hold its account, plus fees for paying in cheques and other services. I mean, they only had £653 in the account, so it wasn't really worth them being charged all of that. And then when she complained, HSBC closed the account altogether, and they can't find any other bank who will take on the account. And I don't know about you, Nina, but I'm really exasperated about the behaviour of the banks. They're making billions and billions and billions of pounds profits, yet they're closing the high street branches down. I get lots of businesses tell me that they're getting their accounts closed down or they can't open an account. And I just think more needs to be done to hold these banks to account. It's not as if they're on their uppers and they need to do this.
I think the banks have got a stranglehold over the politicians. Long gone are the days when you had your friendly bank manager, you had your local branch, you went in and you had a chat if things were tricky, or you felt supported by your bank. That's long gone. Have you ever tried to get through to a banker? I mean, you're on hold and you dial this, dial that. It seems to me that the last 15 years or so, the banks have become taken over by the real hard-nosed money men. And all the people that you might have been able to have a proper conversation with saw what was coming and fled. And the new intake are young, same hard-nosed money men.
And the fact they're getting rid of cash points as well, that you can't... I mean, they put cash points in, because that got, in the 80s, rid of lots of staff and they were saving money. Now they're not even going to do that. But
can I just say, if HSBC are watching this show, anyone there, get this account reopened. Stop charging small groups. You're making billions of pounds.
It's a charity group.
So let they become faceless bureaucrats at these banks, and they need to start having a human face to them again.
I read that piece. I never go to the financial pages, but I did on your behalf. And I read that Lloyds is the only bank that is now accepting this sort of thing. Okay. So Lloyds is, try Lloyds.
And go to your next story, Nina, because you've got a cracking one there.
Well, the thing is, I know you're discussing Will Smith later, but there's another case of a hero fallen, and this is Boris Becker, who was found guilty on 4 counts yesterday of concealing this finance. So he could be up for 7 years in jail. I mean, it's unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable. I mean, if you look at how his downfall started, I remember when he was 17, I saw that match on television, and it was wonderful. He was like a young lion. It was just the most glorious thing. And of course, the lifestyle goes to your head, I suppose, and perhaps it started off badly when he had an encounter in a broom cupboard.
In that posh restaurant in London, and a child ensued.
Exactly, a daughter whose flat he purchased in London. But anyway, there's a whole, if you look in the Times, there's a whole list of debts. What seems to have gone wrong is that many things have gone wrong, his high living lifestyle, but also he has this Mallorcan villa, and he borrowed money from John Caldwell, who's the entrepreneur, and then that was passed on to somebody else, and he's poured money into it, built swimming pools and God knows what else, and apparently he's being sued. He was sued in 2011 by his gardener, who claimed he was owed £246,000 in salary. Now, how can a gardener...
That's a big garden.
That's many gardens. That's a very big garden. But there's also money to ex-wives, money to children, concealment of flats, concealment of apartments that he actually owns. And it's just a real shame. He just doesn't seem to have... He has head in the sand for too long, and I think it's such a pity.
So he's great at tennis, not great with money. Bjorn Borg was the same, wasn't he? Yeah. Great at tennis, not great with money. Have we got time for your last story?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, let's do this.
This is it. Scientists in Cambridge, on the same kind of lines of cloning Dolly the sheep, have claimed they've taken skin cells from a 53-year-old woman and rejuvenated them to act as if they were 30 years younger. Now, this is all at a very early stage, but if this goes well, they could actually repeat the experiment on liver, heart, brain cells, etc. So we could technically be on the threshold of living forever, but living forever as young and fresh as we were.
Yeah, well, I'll be keeping a close eye on that story, Nina. We'll see what's going on.
I need more than anybody, I think, to be perfectly honest.
Nina Mishkov, broadcaster, journalist, thank you so much for being with us today. Excellent. We've got some for you.
Yes, so let's have some GB views. Teresa says, saying the people from the Ukraine need security checks. What about the thousands who have arrived by dinghy with no documentation whatsoever into the UK? Quite right, Teresa.
And I've got one here. The refugee situation is ridiculous. Women and children trying to get into this country legally face jumping through hoops to get here. On the other hand, tens of thousands of young men get into a boat and are welcomed with open arms. That's Angie.
Joe says, I will never vote Conservative as long as Boris remains leader. In fact, there has to be a total change for me to consider voting Conservative again, because Boris is not a Conservative, he is a Liberal.
It, and that's Channel 4, has outlived its function. In 1982, it was the fourth channel. Now it's irrelevant, as there are hundreds of channels. It should not be allowed and not be owned by the state. And the same is true of the BBC. Privatise them both. That's Alan McNeely.
And Graham says, what an eye-opening interview. Boris appears to have no remorse for the idiocy of so many of the authoritarian dictators we were forced to live under. More like communist China than Britain.
And here from Kate, I don't believe anything the Prime Minister said. I don't trust him or anyone else in his cabinet. Lockdown should never have happened. They just made people's lives miserable and plunged many into poverty.
And finally, Mark says, I have to say, when I found out Esther and Philip were going to be interviewing the Prime Minister, I did think two Tory MPs interviewing a Tory PM. I wasn't expecting you both to press him the way you did, and I was really impressed with your questioning and interview style. Great interview. Thank you, Mark. We appreciate that.
Thank you, Mark. Well, now it's time for a look at the week's showbiz news. And we're delighted to be joined in the studio by showbiz correspondent Hayley Palmer. So, Hayley, let's start with this Ed Sheeran account here, the victory he had in court.
Yes, so he won, and I have heard, well, firstly, he's been partying for 2 days. I have heard that bit. I really won't go there on that. But also, I have heard that he will be filming all of his songwriting sessions. So this will never happen again. I mean, I think we've said before, it is so easy. I mean, those songs sound the same when you listen to the radio. So I can see how it can happen. But I think he'll be ultra cautious from now on.
I think he said there's 12 notes and, you know, however many millions of songs are written each year. Of course, some of them might sound the same. And, of course, we're still using...
Yeah, it's happened before, hasn't it?
The only thing I'll say, I saw that he was recording his sessions. This could prevent another law case against him. But you know what? I somehow think not. You could say, of course, you're going through the charade of pretending you're writing it. You still stole my song. So I'm quite sure there will be another court case against him. I've always said to you, Sir Tim Rice, I remember ages ago saying to me, you know, where there's a hit, there's a writ, ever, thus, and probably will be going forward. So, you know, it's huge amounts of money, and if people want to take a pot shot in a law case, that's what they've been doing.
Exactly, but I'm delighted he won.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
so Ed Sheeran had a victory, but Will Smith has not had a victory. He's got a 10-year ban from the Oscars.
Philip, I thought it was going to be maybe 2 or 3 years.
Right, okay.
That was my prediction, and I thought he might just have his Oscar taken away. But when I found out it was 10 years, I was like, wow, OK. And what's interesting is he can win an award or he can be nominated, but he just can't attend the Oscars for the next 10 years or vote.
OK, because I thought he'd sort of resigned from the Academy. So
That's right, he was resigned, but yeah, he had resigned beforehand, yes.
Does that mean I thought that would mean he wouldn't be able to attend anyway to the Oscars if does the 10-year ban mean anything if he's not? I don't.
There's still a lot of questions, isn't there, around it? That's what I was thinking. So if he writes a film, obviously he then just can't go and get the award for that either. So, I mean, there's a lot of questions.
He'll be hanging outside on the door, I don't know, watching all of his friends go in and wave. But he can't come in either.
Yeah, exactly.
He volunteered to collect the award on his behalf if he.
Well, maybe his wife might.
Say he says he's going to do a video of an acceptance speech. He's outside the awards, but he's beamed in to do an acceptance speech.
There we go. But I'm sure he's going through enough already. I have heard that he is in rehab. I don't know if that's official, but I have heard that. So I'm sure he is going through a lot in his head at the moment.
Now, have you been to see Phantom of the Open? Because we went to the cinema.
I have not seen this, and this is on my to-do list. I'm pretty jealous here, Phil.
Hayley, no, we went to see it, and isn't it absolutely magnificent? It's a fantastic film.
And a true film.
The fact that it's a true story of the chap who basically, I don't want to spoil it to anybody who's going to see it and hasn't seen it, but basically the short version of it is that he never played golf in his life. He was a crane operator at a shipyard, and he decided he wanted to play the open golf, and so sent off the form to apply and ticked that he was a professional. And without any checks, they just stamped it and said, yeah, fine, you can play. And he rocked up to play at the open golf, He'd never played golf before, and it was with all these sort of famous people, hitting it about 3 yards at a time.
He was thinking, as most people do, I mean, how hard can golf be? You're just hitting a ball with a sort of whatever stick type thing. How difficult can it be?
Oh,
but it was very funny when he was deciding whether he was going to be professional or not, the filling in the form, and it was very well, what does this handicapping mean? Well, I don't know. I'm not. Oh, just tick professional. We don't have to. We don't have to sign anything else.
This weekend I'm going.
It is
sold.
It is a brilliant film. And what about Lord Sugar and The Apprentice?
Yes, well, the headline was deceiving because when I first read it, I thought it was the current winner that he'd let go already. I thought that can't be right, but it's actually the winner from 2018 called Shan. He's parted ways with her, which often he does with some of the winners. It has been known before, but he has the new winner now, Hardeep, so I'm sure that he's on to winning ways with her.
Well, I always wonder if Lord Sugar's going to try and play a bigger role in politics, like Donald Trump. I always think, I think he's quite an appealing character, Lord Sugar, don't you? I'm a big fan of Lord Sugar.
I'm a bit of a fan of him too, Philip, yeah.
Yeah, I think he'd be popular. Anyway, Hayley, thank you so much.
My
for joining
pleasure.
us, as always.
Coming up, we bring you the latest sports and the cost of living crisis with two entrepreneurs.
And updates from the Grand National with legendary horse trainer Henry de Bromhead, who will join us live from Aintree.
All this and much more coming up next. But first, here's the weather.
Good morning. Alex Deacon here with your latest weather forecast from the Met Office. This weekend, dry and fine for most of us. It is going to be on the chilly side, however, with frosty conditions again tomorrow morning. We've got a little ridge of high pressure dominating, areas of low pressure either side, cold air that's been with us for a number of days stuck in here, but some milder air isn't too far away, and that's going to arrive next week. But for the time being, this weekend, as I said, it is a chilly one. We've got a few showers here and there, chiefly of rain over North Wales, the odd one for Northern Ireland, a mixture of the showers across Scotland, Northern Scotland in particular, with some rain and hill snow. But that snow could come down to low levels across the far north of Scotland at times. One or two scattered showers through the afternoon across the Midlands, maybe southern England, but for the vast majority, dry and bright. Yes, it will cloud over a little bit, and it's not particularly warm, but at least that strong wind has eased down. Still fairly brisk winds across the northeast, still bringing some more showers here overnight. Again, wintry showers as well, with some sleet and snow, perhaps even down to low levels. So it could just turn a little icy. Elsewhere, though, it's a dry night with clear skies, and that is allowing the blue to take hold of the map. So it is going to be a frosty one tomorrow morning. Temperatures even in towns and cities close to or actually bang on freezing, and rural areas will be a little bit below. So yes, a cold start tomorrow yet again, but again, the sun comes up, the frost will melt, and for most it's a fine day with decent spells of sunshine. Even the showers across northern Scotland tending to fade. We will see cloud increasing across the west, perhaps late in the day. A bit of rain just trickling into the west of Northern Ireland. But again, most places dry. Yes, it's still chilly for the time of year, but again, the winds will be light, getting that sunshine. It doesn't feel too bad. And if you're fed up with the cold, better news lies ahead, because these weather fronts moving in will bring cloud and showers next week, but they will also bring milder air, so turning a little warmer. Goodbye.
Europe is in the grip of the most devastating humanitarian crisis since World War II.
The people of Ukraine are facing unimaginable suffering
as their homes are destroyed and their loved ones are killed.
Millions of people are being forced to flee for their lives, carrying only their children, their pets, and the clothes on their back.
The pain, loss and destruction grows by the day.
The people of Ukraine urgently need our help.
Already a vast humanitarian operation is underway. Britain's Disasters Emergency Committee, or DEC, brings together 15 leading aid charities to respond to overseas disasters quickly and efficiently. These charities include the British Red Cross, CARE, Oxfam, Save the Children and World Vision.
Their teams are working on the ground in Ukraine and neighbouring countries to bring vital aid to those who need it most. If you can spare it, your gift to the DEC's humanitarian appeal will go a really long way.
£10 provides essential hygiene supplies for a person for a month.
£50 provides blankets for 4 families.
£100 provides emergency food for 2 families per month.
It's easy to give. You can donate online at dec.org.uk or call the 24-hour donation line on 0370 60 60 900. If you prefer to send a cheque, please post it to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal, PO Box 999, London, EC3A 3AA. To give £10 on your mobile, simply text the word crisis to 70150. Standard network charges apply for calls and you must be 16 or over. Texts are charged at the standard network rate and your £10 donation will be added to your bill.
100% of your donation goes directly to the DEC to save lives and deliver critical support where it's needed.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Welcome back to the Saturday selection. With the Grand National kicking off today and the critical Manchester City-Liverpool game tomorrow, it's time to take a look at the biggest sporting events taking place this weekend. And we're joined in the studio now by sports broadcaster and writer Aidan McGee. So, Aidan, let's start with that big football match.
Yeah, we've never really seen a sequence of games for both clubs like this. I was at Manchester City on Tuesday night because I was up with Eamon and Isabel all week in the morning, so I thought Eamon's the sort of guy who likes to do your homework, so I went along to City on the Tuesday night.
He's a big Man U fan, and he wouldn't have wanted to have gone to City.
He got an invite to the game and he said no. So,
well, what can I tell you? When Eamon and I used to work together, I remember one night it was the Liverpool Man U game, and I was thinking,
days.
I'm hoping Good Morning Britain, it was GMTV, and I remember thinking, oh my, please let Liverpool win, please let Liverpool win, and Man U were in the lead. Luckily, it was a draw. So they obviously knew to keep peace on the GMTV studio between me and Eamon, have a draw.
Well, this sequence of games is the season for both. This is the season for both of them, encapsulated in 4 games. So obviously we're one down of that already because City played Atletico the other night. I went to the game, boring game, but I knew that would happen. But if you look at it, City have got Atletico, Liverpool, Liverpool, and that is Champions League, Premier League, and FA Cup. Liverpool have got Benfica, which is already done. City, Benfica, City. I've never known a sequence like that in football where 4 games against 2 opponents decide the entire season. If Liverpool win tomorrow, they're going to be slight underdogs just because it's at Manchester City and City are fairly imperious at that ground. Jurgen Klopp has said they're going to have to win every game now to get all of that. Don't forget, they're on for the quadruple. City are on for the treble. Liverpool won the Carabao Cup a few weeks ago against Chelsea, as we know. But we're looking at a TV audience here of close to 200 million. It's arguably, even among everything else that's going on this weekend, we've got some huge events. We've got the National, we've got the Golf Masters, we've got the F1, Liverpool versus Manchester City, or City versus Liverpool rather. That looks like it could be the biggest one.
And sticking to Merseyside football, while Liverpool are looking at the quadruple, Everton are looking at relegation, and they're playing Manchester United.
What a shambles. I mean, that same night I was at City, I was keeping an eye on the Everton game up the road. They played up at Burnley. They took the lead. They were 2-1 up. Frank Lampard has gone in there. I honestly think, as savvy as Frank is, and he's a good football person, I've dealt with him many, many times down the years, I don't think he realised the situation there was quite as bad as it was. And usually these clubs tail off because of underfunding. Everton have had the opposite problem. They've overfunded it. They've just bought a load of donkeys and not doing very well. And if it goes down, don't forget, this is really serious because that's a very big club, as you know. And also, it means a hell of a lot in this community. It's a community club. Also, it's never dropped out of the top flight. And I'm talking about in excess of 100 years of history here. So whoever does that does not want that in their CV. If Frank Lampard goes into next season with that on his CV, he may not make a recovery as a manager. It's as serious as that.
The big question is, as a Liverpool fan, do you want Everton to get relegated?
Surely not.
Or do you want...
No, I wanted to stay up.
Oh, you want...
I wanted to stay up.
Good for the city, isn't it?
Yeah.
6 easy points for
half of my friends are Evertonians, the other half are Liverpudlians. We're going out with them on that Easter weekend, so we need to make sure. You're trying to put me on the spot there. You're trying to make me fall out with all my mates at home.
At least they can keep it going for a few
I
weeks.
I definitely want them both in the Premiership.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Of course. People lose jobs and everything like that. You know, the players are all right. They can get other moves and their agents can get them elsewhere. The people, and when a big club falls out of the Premier League, especially a big one like that, they fall really hard financially as well.
And while we're sticking to Merseyside, obviously, the Grand National today.
Yeah, first one.
All our viewers, Aidan, want to know what's going to win. So here you go. You're supposed to be the sports expert.
OK,
so
I'm going to stick my neck out. I haven't won for 30 years, although that was the last time I bet on it. I wanted to preserve my integrity of having a 100% winning race. Now, party politics, as we discussed last week, April the 4th, 92. Today, I'm going for Delta Work, Ruby Walsh. You're starting to see a better quality of horse winning these nationals now. It used to be the old nags sometimes would go on and win it, and that's why you sometimes get long odds even on the favourites, because it's a bit of a lottery, as you know. It's a national hunt race. The best horse can sometimes fall at the second. Hopefully it's not the one that we've backed. I'm not backing one today. Have you backed anyone?
Not yet, but I will.
Yeah, you're waiting on me, are you?
Oh, I was waiting for... We're hoping to speak to Henry de Bromhead, who actually does know what he's talking about, horse racing, who trained the winner last year, and I thought we might get some inside information from him.
Fine.
So, but I wanted to nail your...
70,000 people are going to be there today, so it's the first one in 3 years. They're looking at £150 million through the gate in terms of betting. Of course, the betting shops are open. They weren't last year. You could still bet through all the online mechanisms and apps and what have you, but it is different. We've also got, last year, Rachel Blackmore winning on Minella Times. I mean, extraordinary story. I felt it got buried a little bit.
Henry de Bromhead's
stable jockey.
Stable jockey.
Absolutely. So she's in the running. She's on the same horse, keeping it girl power as well. Snow Leopardess, a grey mare who gave birth to a foal during a 2-year break from racing, is bidding to be the first mother to win the national. What an extraordinary story that would be. But yeah, I just felt that last year Rachel Blackmore got a little bit overshadowed because of everything else that was going on, world events, I guess, and because there wasn't a crowd inside of Aintree. But she'll be going again, and now she could become the second or the. Well, it's been done recently. Tiger Roll won in 2018 and 19, but back to back, that'll be a great achievement for her if she can do it.
We've plugged the virtual Grand National last week, and Snow Leopardess won the virtual Grand National last night. So
is that right?
That's
okay.
supposed to be a good predictor. What's your tip?
Cloth cap. I'm doing that. I know it was the favourite last year, so I'm going for the cloth cap this year.
What are the odds on that?
About 25 to 1, I think.
Okay,
and
so that's why I'm going for it. It sounds like good odds.
I thought Eclair Surf. Okay. So all the viewers out there, you can put a line through, get you about 16 to 1. So you get your ruler out and get a line through those. Cloth cap, Eclair Surf and Delta Work. That's our 3. So you're now left with 37 to choose from. Because those 3 can't win. Those 3 can't win. So, Aidan, thank you so much.
No worries. Good to see you.
Coming up next on the Saturday Selection, we discuss the cost of living crisis and what we can expect in the coming months.
And we get an update from Aintree, where the Grand National is taking place today. But first, let's get the news headlines.
It's 11:35. I'm Simon Pusey in the GB newsroom. Latest British military intelligence shows that Russia continues to hit Ukrainian non-combatants such as civilians. It follows a Russian rocket strike on a train station in Kramatorsk in eastern Ukraine, which killed at least 52 people, including 5 children, and injured more than 100. The Ministry of Defence says Russia's ambitions to establish a land corridor between Crimea and the Donbass continue to be thwarted by Ukrainian resistance. Trade unions are organising a protest today in solidarity with Ukraine, calling for the immediate withdrawal of Russian troops and a ceasefire. The demonstration in London will also demand that the government admits all refugees seeking to come to the UK without further delay. A march will be held from Hyde Park and finish outside Parliament. The Queen and other members of the royal family are expected to privately mark the first anniversary of the Duke of Edinburgh's death. He died on this day last year at Windsor Castle, just months short of his 100th birthday. His daughter, Princess Anne, will mark the day in Sydney as she begins her 3-day tour of Australia. A Dutch teenager who disappeared after going diving off the coast of Malaysia has died. That's according to his British father. Officials say 14-year-old Nathan Chesters has likely drifted into Indonesian waters. Chesters was reported missing on Wednesday afternoon, about an hour into a training dive with his father, a Frenchwoman and the Norwegian diving instructor. The 3 other divers were rescued hours after the initial missing report. And the chocolate firm Ferrero has issued a recall on all of its Kinder chocolate products manufactured at a site in Belgium amid salmonella fears. The company says it is suspending operations at its plant in Arlon, and it says will reopen only once certified by the authorities. The UK Health Security Agency said that 67 people are known to have been infected in the outbreak linked to the treats. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Don't go anywhere. Saturday Selection will be back in just a few minutes.
Europe is in the grip of the most devastating humanitarian crisis since World War II.
The people of Ukraine are facing unimaginable suffering
as their homes are destroyed and their loved ones are killed.
Millions of people are being forced to flee for their lives, carrying only their children, their pets, and the clothes on their back.
The pain, loss and destruction grows by the day.
The people of Ukraine urgently need our help.
Already a vast humanitarian operation is underway. Britain's Disasters Emergency Committee, or DEC, brings together 15 leading aid charities to respond to overseas disasters quickly and efficiently. These charities include the British Red Cross, CARE, Oxfam, Save the Children and World Vision.
Their teams are working on the ground in Ukraine and neighbouring countries to bring vital aid to those who need it most. If you can spare it, your gift to the DEC's humanitarian appeal will go a really long way.
£10 provides essential hygiene supplies for a person for a month.
£50 provides blankets for 4 families.
£100 provides emergency food for 2 families per month.
It's easy to give. You can donate online at dec.org.uk or call the 24-hour donation line on 0370 60 60 900. If you prefer to send a cheque, please post it to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal, PO Box 999, London, EC 3A 3AA. To give £10 on your mobile, simply text the word crisis to 70150. Standard network charges apply for calls and you must be 16 or over. Texts are charged at the standard network rate and your £10 donation will be added to your bill.
100% of your donation goes directly to the DEC to save lives and deliver critical support where it's needed.
Welcome back to the Saturday Selection. Coming up at midday is Alistair Stewart and friends. But to get a preview of what's coming up after this hour, I'm delighted to say Alistair joins us now. So what's coming on at 12? What have you got?
Well, a potpourri, a wonderful and glorious potpourri. Just picking up one story that was in the news bulletin there about the anniversary of the death of the Duke of Edinburgh. I'm thrilled to bits to say that one of the things, and I know you're both a bit involved in it as well, that he was so remembered for was the Duke of Edinburgh's awards, which really just helps kids, doesn't matter what race, gender, sex, class, anything they are, to get out there and do something good for themselves and for the society. And we've got Dame Tanni Grey-Thompson, the great Paralympian, who's the new chair of the Duke of Edinburgh's award scheme, coming in to reflect upon that. But the other thing which is kind of fueling a lot of my programme is if I was Prime Minister, I'm not sure I'd sit down and give an interview to someone I sacked and to someone who was one of the first to put their head above the parapet and say, this man's so dreadful he's got to go. I genuinely think it was an intriguing interview, and there are 2 bits I'm going to pick out and test a little bit further. The degree to which he can sit there and tell you that he clings to the Thatcherite traditions. I mean, he's absolutely right on borrowing, but it's a bit difficult to square with national insurance and thresholds and the rest of it. And the second bit really is the idea that it's a kind of relaunch. And that's what I sensed quite a bit. So we've got Tom Tugendhat, who I know you both know very well indeed, Chair of Foreign Affairs Select Committee. He's coming on at the end of the programme. And also the great Anthony Seldon, who is recently back from his honeymoon. So he very kindly agreed, nevertheless, to talk about it. Because Seldon's really good on what makes politicians tick. He's one of the great biographers. And also he's very good on one other little story, which was the other Rishi Sunak story, which I picked up on midweek. He donated 100,000 quid to Winchester College, his old school. And half of the people on my timeline said, oh, that's great. It helps poor people get on to one of the great schools. And others said, well, if he's got that much money to spare, then maybe he should be giving it to state schools and the rest of it. So we've got a discussion about that.
Well, a question maybe for Anthony as well is the one that Philip posed to the Prime Minister, which said, we know what Thatcherism is all about, but what is Johnsonism?
Yes.
And understanding that. So that could be a good question.
The Prime Minister just seemed to say it was about levelling up. So I don't know whether Anthony Seldon can do a better job of defining Johnsonism.
Well, if anyone can, Anthony can. And I think that one of the great things about him is that he writes beautifully, but he's also a historian. And it's a little bit like, the greatest biography was probably Hugo Young's Thatcher, One of Us. And you're quite right about, what is Thatcherism, what was Blairism, and so on. And we all know how close we are to the local elections, and the general election can now be tomorrow because the law's changed.
Well, we'll be off air with a cup of coffee and watching you.
I'm grateful for that. 12 till 2.
Excellent.
Brilliant.
Thank you, Alistair. Now, the Prime Minister is admitting that the cost of living crisis is only set to worsen as many Brits continue to struggle with rocketing household bills.
With inflation expected to hit a record 9% later this year, Boris Johnson has rejected calls to cancel his national insurance hike, but lauded the tax cuts announced in the Chancellor's spring statement this year.
So what developments can we expect with the cost of living crisis in the country in the coming weeks and months? And what has been the real-life impact on citizens? Joining us now is Christine.
Good afternoon.
Hi there. Hello. So we were talking about lockdown, we're talking about the cost of living, but you, as somebody who runs a small business, what has these last few years been like on you?
It's been really, really hard. My business has been affected particularly by lockdown. I'm a fitness instructor. I teach classes to older population. Not only were the classes severely restricted during lockdown, we went to online classes temporarily, but also the long-term impact is really now becoming obvious as people are really too frightened to come back to group situations that they were more than happy to participate in before lockdown. So my participants are down in numbers. There may be people who never come back to classes that were doing them a lot of good before lockdown. I'm seeing a really big change in my business. So with the cost of living troubles on top of that, that's just adding to the whole situation. It's coming from both sides for me.
So, Christine, what's the most important thing for you? Is it for the government to go out and reassure people that it's safe to go out again and in effect try and undo that scaremongering that we saw during the pandemic? Or is it more important for you that the Chancellor cuts taxes, put more money into people's pockets so they can afford to go out? Which is the one that's affecting you the most? Is it that people can't afford to come out, or because people are too scared to come out?
I think the people can't afford to come out is much newer than the fear. I think the fear is very long term, and I don't know how you unfrighten people that you've scared witless about their health. I really don't know how the government would ever achieve that. If they could, they should. They really should, because hospitality is hugely affected, not just my classes, but also hospitality, entertainment, travel, all of these things are affected.
And when you're looking at paying your bills and paying back past debt that you've accrued during lockdown, how are you coping?
scraping by, getting there, and just hoping that things don't go up anymore. I'm one of the really, really fortunate people who just went onto a fixed rate electricity tariff just before all of the problems with utilities happened. So I believe I'm fixed for 2 years. So I've got a bit of 2 years grace. I only have electricity. I don't have gas or oil where I live. So I'm completely reliant on electricity. I won't see that bite personally for a couple of years. Will we be out the other side of this? I doubt it. That's really going to hit in a couple of years' time. I'm really, really lucky. But I know a lot of people who haven't got that, the luck of being on a fixed rate, who are really struggling right now.
Christine Bickley, fitness owner, somebody who owns their own small business. Thank you for the moment. We're joined in studio, Phil.
Yeah, we're also joined by Alan Miller, founder of the Nighttime Industries Association. Alan, I know that you're organising a sort of a campaign tour around the country. What is it that you want to see the government do?
Well, I think firstly, the Together Declaration is doing something. We have 300,000 signatories and we campaigned very strongly to get rid of vaccine mandates and passports. But having just seen the interview with the Prime Minister, I think two things spring to mind that we have to address first of all. The first is that he never really addressed your point about cost-benefit analysis. I think the public deserve a right to understand on what merit any decisions were made, and then to say he wouldn't rule it out again, even though there has not been cost-benefit analysis, seems to me really particularly egregious and goes to the heart of the problem about any discussion about cost of living, which is where the public is within all of this. We've just seen this 2-year experience, which in my opinion, and many now is being reiterated by studies like Johns Hopkins University, that lockdowns were very damaging in every arena: health, the economy, mental health, children, and now we're seeing the consequences of that. Now, the cost of living crisis the second point he made, actually, just to address it, was that personal responsibility, well, we might trust ourselves, but not our next door neighbours. But we should remember that nearly 1 million people volunteered to do stuff at the start of this situation 2 years ago.
I thought that was an interesting point. You know, we believe in personal responsibility for ourselves, but not for somebody else. And I thought, well, then don't you just make sure that everybody is aware of what they have to do? It doesn't mean you go into a lockdown. That was an interesting quote that he said that we don't trust other people, basically, only ourselves.
Well, he demonstrates that he doesn't trust the public. I think it's part of policy today that we think that, you know, when we talk about the public, it's almost like the mad, bad and dangerous. They're like children and we have to regulate when in doubt. However, as it happens, before each of the lockdowns, ordinary people, many of them just decided to stop going out as much at certain points. That was what the curve was. But this whole notion that you can't trust people and you have to have this kind of very draconian policy. Let's be honest, it was never, we threw away the pandemic strategy. There's been no answer as to why that's happened, and imposed this kind of very hard measure rather than perhaps, you know, then he was talking about fat people, but there was no attempt to discuss why shielding vulnerable people during the lockdown could have been the most effective policy. So I do think that we have to take a step back and address it. And even though we're in the eye of the storm now, we also have to be honest that this isn't of the making just of the last 2 years, or either of Ukraine, right? But both of those things have exacerbated it terribly. But actually, in the last 5 decades, the whole approach towards energy, towards robust development and infrastructure, towards wealth creation for everyone has been really sluggish in Britain. And now we have to address those things. But we can't address them when the public's treated in this way.
All right, so because there's a lot there going on, and I can hear there's lots of points you want to bring out.
Yeah.
Now, what I'm wondering is how you're going to bring all of this together. Are you going to use something like the local elections to sort of bring your questions to the fore? And what you're talking about, is the country resilient and secure with its energy? What are we doing? You know, lockdown, what have we done there, and ruined businesses? And the cost of living really has come out of a lockdown for 2 years. But what I'm wanting to know is, what are you going to use as the vehicle to galvanise the country, galvanise those individuals and get your message across?
It's a very good question. So absolutely, the upcoming local elections on May the 5th that very few people have talked about up until now, we're going to encourage everyone that we have, and we have hundreds of signatories in every constituency, to actually put pressure on the candidates, all that are standing, with certain key questions. Firstly, where they stood on lockdown and would they have them again? But then what are their approaches to certain key areas? And we want to make sure that ordinary people get their voices heard. And actually, a lot of people feel politically homeless today, right? The last couple of years has demonstrated that. There are a number of issues that Together Declaration campaigns around. They're all to do with freedom, democracy and rights. But the key part is the public having a voice and making sure that it does that. So there are ongoing issues. We saw off vaccine passports, but the questions of digital ID and central bank digital currency is very important. It's very important in a number of areas. If you look at what happened to the truckers in Canada and President Trudeau deciding to stop people's bank accounts, there's questions of control. If perhaps people aren't decent citizens or doing net zero things, do they suddenly get impacted? There's a range of issues.
So if all your points there are fundamentally about our freedoms being gradually eroded, maybe not us being aware of them, so you thought it was here, the attack on our freedoms, but actually it's elsewhere. So is your focus going to be on freedoms, or is it, or do they merge into the other, lockdown, or is it the cost of living? Where is your focus?
I don't think you can really separate these things, because the main core thing that we want to do together is continue to insist that the public has a voice and is not treated with contempt and disdain. As we've seen the Prime Minister, I think, again, reiterate, well, maybe I would have to do it again, but where was the cost-benefit analysis? So we just had this public inquiry terms of reference, and we got everyone to respond to that. We'll see what happens. Perhaps, like other inquiries, they hope it will take many years and it will then go into significance. But we're going to continue to do events around the UK to address these points that have come up, and actually to hold elected representatives' feet to the fire and say, this is what you said and this is what's happened. And, in a way, what we want to do is make sure that there's a recognition that you can't just keep treating the public with contempt. Now, so it's a combination of those points. It's all of them.
And I think, Alan, you brought up an interesting point there, Philip. I don't know what you think about this. The fact that a lot of people are now politically homeless. So you've got lots of people who don't know where they want to go. Maybe they're going to follow the Together movement. But do you think that's true?
Well, I mean, one of the points I think, Alan, is that politicians give people half the equation when they introduce a policy. Usually the positive bit, they don't tell them the negative bit. And I just think maybe what we need, and I wonder what you thought about this, is sort of politicians who give full answers. So when they say we're going to introduce a lockdown, it will save people's lives, people think, oh, well, that's great, let's go along with that. If they'd have said it will save people's lives, by the way, it's going to fuel a massive amount of inflation when we have a surge, when the economy reopens. It's going to cause lots of mental health problems. It's
children damning on their livelihood.
Damage children's education. It's going to nearly bankrupt the country. People might have had a different view about it, and perhaps what we need are politicians who, when they introduce a policy, tell you what the downsides are at the same time as the upside.
Well, I think we've got a deficit of honesty, right? We've got a problem that transparency and honesty isn't there, and I think the public recognises that. And it's not that we can't... one of the things is, if people would have got up and said, we really don't know about some of these things, and we're experimenting, and hey, can you... The British public would back people, right? What we got was nudge, what we got was fear, what we got was a lot of propaganda with definites and absolutes. And that's very insulting, because now there's a series of collateral damages, and that's important. Just the point about energy and cost of living.
All right, I think we're going to have to draw it to a close here, Alan, but I think you make some very relevant points, and that is lots of people are feeling politically homeless, and we need more honesty from our politicians who tell us exactly what's going to happen when they introduce a new policy. So, Alan Millen, thank you very much for joining us today. I think we might be able to squeeze in just one or two GB views. So we've got Graham says there, 10 years ban is a tad excessive. This is for Will Smith in his book. I wanted him punished, but proportionately. I think we should have removed the security for, say, maybe 3 years or something like that. But that was just too big a ban for him. Well, look, that's all we've got time for today. Philip and I will be back next week at exactly the same time. But next is Alistair Stewart. Don't go away.
Good morning, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather forecast from the Met Office. This weekend, dry and fine for most of us. It is going to be on the chilly side, however, with frosty conditions again tomorrow morning. We've got a little ridge of high pressure dominating, areas of low pressure either side, cold air that's been with us for a number of days stuck in here, but some milder air isn't too far away, and that's going to arrive next week. But for the time being, this weekend, as I said, it is a chilly one. We've got a few showers here and there, chiefly of rain over North Wales, the odd one for Northern Ireland, a mixture of the showers across Scotland, Northern Scotland in particular, with some rain and hill snow. But that snow could come down to low levels across the far north of Scotland at times. One or two scattered showers through the afternoon across the Midlands, maybe southern England.